I hope you can begin to see how this is actually working. There's a reason for why I do what I do, and I make the statement, if you do what I do, you can do what I do. You can get the results that I get. Simple, simple concepts. All right. Now, the next little section is going to be kind of fun, and for parts of this, I'm going to take the narrative that I give you, and I'm going to put pictures with them and create a little video so you can see some of the things. What I'm going to do is a little clothing evaluation. Now, this will just be a short one because in the full Winter Without Worries class, I spent a lot of time on this subject and go into much greater depth than here. But for this presentation, I'll give you a short video version of the word picture I'm trying to paint for you so that you can see it better and get an idea what I'm talking about. Please understand, I want to say it right now, I'm going to be talking about some of the issues that are with clothing and some of the design features out there that have problems with them or materials. Am I saying that everything is no good? I'm not saying that. But what I'm wanting you to get is an understanding of when you go to the shelf, to the hanger, and you look at something on the shelf, you go like, okay, how does this square up? I look at the hang tag, I look at the materials, I read the tag to see what it's made from, and I have an understanding of how and why some things work, and so I look at the garment and I go like, this one probably won't do as well, this one's going to be better. It may not be the best, but it's better. Or when you go to your closet and you're trying to pick out what's in there that you're going to wear, you can say, well, this is going to give me better performance for these situations. People have tried some really clever things to engineer a solution, and I get to talk about engineers all the time because I are one. And I've been working on repenting of being an engineer for a long time. Now, we need engineers, and we need people who create and design, but sometimes we try to solve a problem by creating a device that controls the problem rather than figuring out what's the bottom line with the problem, and let's solve it in a very simple, in a very passive way. If you can solve a situation in your clothing, in fact, I have a piece of clothing, and some of this clothing has, heaters in it and things like that. Okay, that works, but not for very long, and only as long as you have your heat source and things like that. So we keep trying to solve it with an active device rather than with something that's very passive, obeying the rules of physics that I've been teaching you, and so that I have a warm furnace called my body, feed the furnace, keep it warm, producing heat, let it trap the heat inside and release the moisture to the outside. Voila! I don't have to do anything. You see, the intelligence is built into the clothing. What I'm wanting to do is help you understand as you're evaluating clothing what some of the issues are, and you're going to have to do the best with what you have. So I'm going to put some pictures with these things so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about. And I'm not here to be sarcastic, and I'm not really laughing at things. I want to do it in a way that keeps it kind of light so that you'll remember it, and you go like, oh yeah, that's a problem. Gee, I hope I can find a way to solve that. All right, let's start with something that's simple. Let's start with hand protection, hand wear. Well, gloves, mittens, that's what we're talking about. Remember in the very beginning I said all things being equal, that mittens will always be warmer than gloves, same material, same thickness and those things, because you have a reduced surface area for the volume that's enclosed, less places to lose heat from. And if you had on enough insulation, remember we said it's 1 inch of insulation that you need to take care of yourself. If you had 1 inch of insulation surrounding each one of your fingers are going to be spread apart into this gigantic paw, and you couldn't do anything. So the fingers on gloves will always be thin, and so now you have all kinds of thin insulation and tricks with waterproofing and vapor barriers and radiant barriers trying to trap the heat inside to keep your hands warm for a while, and they work for a while. But what if you're going to be spending the night out there at 20 below zero and nothing but your clothing? Your gloves are going to be trouble. So we go to mittens on that philosophy. Now let's talk about one other thing here. You can go buy like one of these little hand warmers, a little catalytic heater that you put some of the lighter fluid in, and you light it and it kind of glows in there, and you can put it down in your pocket to warm your hands, and you can put them in your sleeping bag. You can put them in different places. These were real popular years ago. And what's the problem? Well, the problem is, number one, you're dependent on fire, and if your fire goes out, now you have a problem. The other problem is, particularly don't ever take them in a sleeping bag because they produce lots of carbon monoxide, and that'll get you. They're using up oxygen. But the problem is, it's an admission that you have a problem. Your clothing isn't adequate to take care of you just because you wear it. and you're trying to artificially solve the problem. See, this is what engineers very often do. We want to artificially solve the problem rather than getting at the root, which says, well, you're producing heat, just don't lose as much. Simple idea. The other thing that's troublesome is these little heater packs. You know, it's a little package that you rip the outside off, has a white thing in there, and you shake it up and it gets warm. They do, in fact, get warm. Same idea. If you're dependent on keeping your hands from freezing because you're wearing one of those things, then that simply means that you're totally inadequate in terms of the insulation. And once you run out of those things, once you run out of fuel for your little catalytic heater, once you run out of those little heat packs, then now where are you at? You know, you were dependent on something that was unreliable. What's reliable? If I keep my body properly fed, hydrated, we'll talk about that in a later session, and I'm producing heat, all I have to do is trap the heat and get rid of the moisture. There's the reliability. So forget those things. I mean, it's a temporary solution, but it makes you a victim when you lose the materials, when you run out of them, or something like that. Remember, we want to get rid of victimhoods. Okay, so gloves are going to be much more limited. They have a temporary place. Now, I'm going to talk about one glove in particular that would be of use to you, and this is one that you would use inside of your mittens from time to time. And that will be using what we call an anti-contact glove. An anti-contact glove is something that's going to be very, very thin. It'll be synthetic in nature. It will be usually out of nylon, maybe polyester or polypropylene, but we're not trying to insulate it with so much. What we're doing is, it's called an anti-contact glove, is to prevent contact with what? Well, something really cold if you have your hands out there. Now, periodically, I'm going to take my hands out of my mittens to do work, and I need my fingers out there. I might be working with a stove. I might have a fuel bottle. I might have something that where you just need the digits out there. So I pull them out of my mittens, and then I'm going to go touch something like a fuel bottle, an aluminum fuel bottle. It's been sitting outside. It's 20 below zero, and I pick up that thing with a bare hand that'll always have a little moisture on it. You stick right to it. You nail yourself to it. Remember my story, the tongue on the flagpole really did that one. You have damp hands, they really stick to things. You probably reach in your freezer and the ice tray every now and then with hands that are damp, and the ice cubes stick to your hands because they're below zero in there. You don't want that to be happening, particularly when you pick something up, because you can flash freeze. You can instantly, in just moments, freeze the surface of your flesh, have a frostbite right on there, and the problem is you can't let go of it because now you're stuck to it. You try to open your hand to let go, and it's stuck right there, and that's just not a good thing. So when you're working with any kinds of materials, and by the way, you'll stick to plastic. When it gets cold out there and you're damp, you can stick to all kinds of things. You'll stick to ice, you'll stick to plastic, you'll stick to metal being the worst one of all. So we use an anti-contact glove when we're going to be taking our hands out and we want to be touching something cold. So number one, we don't stick to it, and number two, our skin isn't in immediate contact with something that's so cold that it could literally freeze the flesh quickly. Now, even with one of these anti-contact gloves on, I can't be handling a cold object for a real long period of time, but it gives me a few moments to deal with it. So we will use gloves. They have their place. Remember, the other part of keeping your hands warm is taking care of the core? All the way back in those previous programs. This is how this stuff all keeps fitting together. Okay, now let's get down to mittens, and let's talk about mittens for a moment and selecting of mittens. One of the challenges that you have with mittens is that, well, there's a couple of them that I have here, and I buy things through the years and I test them. Sometimes they're given to me, say, hey, try this out, see how it works. Both of these mittens that I have right here, they happen to be, well, they're waterproof, breathable. They're made with Gore-Tex. We already know what the issue is on that because my hands are sweating in them, and after a period of time, the insulation is going to get wet in there simply because of the humidity that's coming off of my hand. If I needed to reach into something where there's going to be a lot of water or liquid, I might put on a waterproof shell temporarily, but I don't want it attached because the moisture is going to build up in those gloves. Now, there's something else about both of these. This one that's kind of tan, and it says it's a large, it's a men's large, and I put it on, and take a look at what's called the gauntlet up here, up around the arm. And you look at that and you see that it's like, well, there's no room. I mean, it fits over top of just my shirt that I'm wearing here. If I had any insulation on at all, it won't fit. So when you're selecting a mitten, you want it to have a broad gauntlet on it. It's called a gauntlet at this opening here. That's like a funnel you can put your hand inside of. So this tan one's no good at all if I'm trying to do anything with any insulation on the rest of my body. The brown one that we have right here, now it has a larger gauntlet. You see it's got this elastic in it that expands. And in the case of this one, which is made with a waterproof shell, it's a Gore-Tex material, or it's a coated material on this. It has a removable liner, which, okay, helps a little bit, but the problem I have with this thing is that when I have it on, and you see it has the elastic cuff that's on it when I put it on right here, and that, so it has this big gauntlet, but we want the elastic because you don't want snow and wind blowing into it. Okay, now when you have a mitten on your other hand, and I'm now trying to put on my other mitten with a mittened hand, you can't do it. This is one of the things that people say about mittens is, well, I put mittens on and I can't do anything with them, and what they're really saying is I have a hard time getting them on and off. And once I get them on, I don't want to take them off because they're hard to get back on. And once I have them on, I need to use my fingers. I can't use my fingers, so I can't do anything with them. And if I take them off, I can't get them back on and all those kinds of things. That's the problem. In fact, I describe it this way sometimes. If everybody has one of these mittens that has this elasticy, cuffy thing on it up here, and you have a team of people, 3 or 4 people, well, somebody can always have bare hands helping somebody else, but the last guy at the end of the row, he can get his hand in one of them, then he has to walk around with his hand in his pocket because he can't get his mitten on. Well, what you want is a mitten. Now I'll show you my design of mittens, and a mitten that has a very large gauntlet on it. And you see when I put this on with a regular shirt, I've got lots of room in there because I'm going to be wearing a fat insulated sleeve, and so I have this big gauntlet. And you say, well, oh golly, if I have that big mitten and I'm not wearing my big fat shirt that goes inside of it, then I get air in there and I get snow in there. Well, if it's not cold enough where I have to wear my big fat shirt, I probably don't even need the mitten. And if I am wearing the mitten, it's not all that cold, so it's not that big of a deal. You have to think about how all this stuff works together. So it has a very large gauntlet on it that allows me to keep my fat sleeve inside of it. But here's the other thing about it. This is not waterproof. This is a nylon. It's synthetic. It allows the moisture to pass from the inside to the outside. But notice one other thing. It's fat. It's thick. As a matter of fact, it's made so that it's 1 inch thick because that's what I need to have my hand surrounded with. So the gauntlet is the issue. Now, what this one allows me to do, see, to take this mitten on and off, I have them both on my hands, and people say, oh, I can't do anything with my mittens on. Well, I can't do anything with my mittens on either, so it's like take them off. Well, then I can't get them back on. Observe what I do here, because I can put these in between my legs, and I just pull my hands out of them, can do what I need to do for 3 or 4 or 5 seconds, and then I can just shove my hands back inside, and they slide right in there because I don't have any elastic cuff or anything to adjust on them. I can put them on and off very quickly, so you get out of them, do your job, put it back in there. So one of the features that I'm looking for in a mitten, and if I design clothing, as I've done for years, I design it with a big, broad funnel of a gauntlet on it so that I can get my fat insulated clothing down inside of it, and I don't have to struggle with it. Design features is what we're looking at all the time, how and why it'll work, along with the fact that I need to have adequate insulation to take care of me so that I'm not going to get cold hands. All right, so the hand protection is fairly simple, but one last little thing I want to cover that's extremely important, and that is how we keep from losing our mittens. One of the things that you must have with your mittens, as far as I'm concerned, is you must have a lanyard that attaches them to you. Because if I'm in very severe conditions, and if I need to take my mittens off for a moment out there, severe conditions means high wind, but I need my digits. I have my anti-contact glove on inside. I pull my hand out of it. I'm going to adjust something really quick and then put my hand back in there. And I'm holding my mittens in between my blind legs because I get them off that way so I can shove my hands back in them. But if something happens and I have to take a step, I lose my balance, I drop my mittens and they blow away, I'm in deep wazooey out there. So I must have a lanyard that attaches them to me. Very often you'll see there'll be a lanyard point on them, and it's usually up at the cuff end on here, and there may be a little attach point on your sleeve or something like that. Now, that doesn't work. Nobody ever hooks them up down there, and if you do take that mitten off, it's dangling down there at the end of your sleeve. It's like a fish on the end of a line out here. It's always in your way. That doesn't work. But it's important that you have the lanyard, so the most likely thing that you will do will be using a lanyard that may in fact go around your neck. You might have to make this, and that's what I had to do. So I make this lanyard that has kind of a yoke that goes around my neck, and then I have a place where I can attach it to my mittens, and now then if I take my mittens off, they can just dangle there. When I designed the full clothing set, I'll show you a feature really quick. This is not a design clothing class, but you might want to add this to your clothing out there. You can do this. You see my mitten attach point for the lanyard is down by the thumb on the side, and you go like, well, nobody does that. Well, the Eskimos have done it for thousands of years because they know better. Because when I hang it down my thumb on here, you see the bottom hangs down. And so when it's not being worn by me, the opening is hanging down. If I put it up at the cuff end, the cuff is hanging up, and this thing is a snow catcher. If it's snowing and blowing, it's catching inside of it, or if it drags through the snow, it picks it up and drops it inside, and oh darn, I've got a problem then. So I want my mitten lanyard attach point down by my thumb, right by the web of the thumb. And then I hang it around my neck, or as show you in this picture right here, the best place to hang it is a lanyard that goes from your armpit. Think of it this, from your armpit down to the mitten in there, and it's a short little lanyard. It's not around my neck. It's a short little lanyard, and when I take those mittens off, they hang to my side, conveniently attached right there, but they hang to my side out of the way. And there's other things you can do with them. Well, this is not the full clothing class. We'll do that another time. But these are things that you can either look for in properly designed clothing that knows what the heck they're doing. If somebody puts an attachment under the armpit in there, they know what they're doing. They probably learned it from me, and that's why I teach these things, so our clothing keeps getting better and better. We've been teaching this since the 70s, earlier than that, the late 60s, early 70s, we've been teaching how you attach them there. We just learned that from the Eskimos. Pay attention to people who live this stuff all the time. All right, next, let's talk about head protection. Remember, the head's part of the core and how important it is, so if we're trying to keep our hands and feet warm, we really want to be taking care of the core. And I described to you the core is going from the top of your head to the middle of your thighs, excluding the lower legs and the arms. So the head and neck are really, really important. One of the things we've gotten away from using because it's kind of out of vogue unless you're upscale or something, and that's scarves. Sometimes people will use a thing like a neck gaiter because that's an admission that the clothing isn't designed right because it doesn't close up really well around the neck. And you have a lot of blood supply around the neck. So when I talk about the head, we're not just talking about the top of your head. We're talking about your whole head, including your face, and your neck. It's like everything above the shoulders you're taking care of. So a scarf is a great way to go, but you may use a neck gaiter to make up for some of that. So neck gaiters work fairly well. Now then, there's the balaclava. Very often you have a balaclava that's used. And you take a balaclava and you pull it over your head, and it gives you some neck protection, and it fits tightly around the head and the face. And you take a look at this one balaclava on here, and they kind of help, but man, they ice up in the front, your nose and your mouth, and they're forever catching moisture. But you're trying to use them because like the wind is blowing and it's on your face, and the only thing I want is my goggles out there, so I have on a balaclava and I have on a pair of goggles, but covering things up, but still I got all this ice that's collecting all over me, and then I'm getting wet from the ice. Find that unpleasant. So we'll talk about what you really do for your face here in just a moment. You come to hats, and this, I have a hat right here. Well, they call them sometimes a bomber hat or a musher hat, and it's got somewhat of a head protection on it, and then it has these flaps that come way down, and they Velcro under the chin. But these things don't fit very well. What I'm telling you, I want you to, you go into the store and you're trying something on and it feels pretty good, kind of like it kind of fits. Go look in a mirror and look at some of these things. On this particular one, when I tighten it down, first off, there's not enough Velcro to really stick it around you very well. These narrow little strips of Velcro, it comes loose all the time. And then it doesn't cup to the head very well, and what you end up on the sides is these kind of, I call them twin turbo air scoops. It's going to blow air right back on your ears in there because it scoops it up. Doesn't seal well. If I'm concerned about wind and cold and things, I want things to both seal up very well, but I want insulation. Of course, this particular one, you're going to look at them, and none of them are very thick. Has some fleece on the inside, and this one's waterproof, breathable. I'm going to have moisture build up on the inside of it. It can't get through. Not enough insulation to take care of me. And then twin turbo air scoops. That ain't so great. So what do you want a hat to look like? Well, I'll show you what my hat kind of looks like here. And oh, by the way, as you look at these pictures, I know this is dorky looking. First off, it's fat. So now I have a fat head. But what did I need? I need an inch of insulation. I've got an inch of insulation over my entire head. It's designed in a way that kind of cups around my head and seals around the sides and everything very, very nicely. Comes down over top of my ears and fits right to my head. And of course, then I have a hood that can go over top of this to seal up around my neck. So here's this hat on here, and once again, people say, well, that sure looks kind of dorky. Well, what did I tell you in the very beginning? Style is being worn at 40 below zero no matter what it looks like. This particular hat has some unusual features about it because it was designed when I was working with the military in particular. It has, and this was patented, the patents have now been expired on it, so don't worry about that. And we'll even teach people how to make these things. It has what I call the clear view bill on it, because that bill will flip down and it'll give me the sun protection that I need. But if I'm around equipment, or in this case in a turret of a tank or something like that, it flips up so it's completely out of the way, not sticking out there where it's going to cause trouble. And it was designed to do that. The other thing about it is some people would look at it and say, this looks kind of strange because you got the chin strap in the back. Well, that's not a chin strap, that's an ear flap adjuster, because it allows me to take and adjust my ear flaps up so that I can completely uncover the ear canal so I can hear very clearly, particularly if I'm standing watch or something like that. I need my ear canal uncovered if I can, but still give me all the protection I can get. So depending on what your needs are, play with this stuff, get some experience with it, and get something that'll really, really work. Now let's talk about hoods. As far as I'm concerned, and when I talk about PALS, P-A-L-S, PALS Arctic Living System, a PALS shirt, the shirt has a hood. So a lot of times people look and say, well, you just wear a coat. Well, I do, and you can think of it as parka if you want to, but that's actually my shirt because that's all there is. Underneath, I may have a modesty garment on the inside so that it isn't just my bare hide hanging out, but it's one layer, serious. And so the hood is attached to it, and the hood is attached so it can't be taken off and lost, because if you lose it, you've got a big problem. And then there we are with a hood that is going to fit. Well, it has to be large enough to fit over top of my big fat headwear. So be sure your hoods are big enough, but then they have to be adjustable. So you have the draw cords in them, and you have the adjustable flaps on them. But this particular hood is designed in a way that with the draw cords, the way that they pull it down, and here again, if you're in the store, you're buying something, you get a hood, put on what you're going to wear, because if you have just a bare head on and you put on it and said, hey, it fits on my head just fine, now then you try to put on some kind of a hat, particularly if it has any insulation, darn thing won't fit. It needs to fit. It needs to cover you up. So here you are, standing in front of the mirror, and you want to look and be sure that it squeezes down around you and that I have neck protection. And I may have the high collar in this case that comes up high, and it's an insulated collar, and then I have the parts of the hood that'll close down around it, draw it down, and if I need to, I can get these straps so they'll come right across my nose and mouth. So it kind of gives me the balaclava effect for the short period of time that I may need that, so I don't have a lot of my face being exposed. And then when I'm done, I can just open things up. And yes, ice will build right around your mouth and your nose for a little while, but I'm not wearing it all the time, just when I need to wear it. So pay particular attention to hoods. Hoods are a must, and the hoods must fit over top of whatever else you're going to have on your headwear, and you need to have adequate insulation. So I want an insulated hood over top of an insulated hat, so I have at least 1 inch of insulation surrounding my head, or I'm going to be losing too much heat, and the body will never allow the head to get cold, so it's going to suck all the heat out of your feet and out of your fingers, let them get cold to keep your head warm. That's why when I tell the story, people say, well, yeah, but my head's not cold. Yes, it's not cold, because it's sucking all the heat out of your feet. That's why your feet are cold. See, it all fits together, and you want to pay attention to the clothing design so that you can get it right. Now, when I talk about the rest of the body in here, we've actually covered a fair amount of this when we're talking about layers and giving you an idea about how to make that work. Bottom line is you need to have enough thickness that you have the equivalent of 1 inch of air or more, and you want to, so you're trapping in the heat, and you want to be releasing the moisture. And that's all the rules that I gave you. And most of the clothing out there doesn't obey that real well, because if you're dealing with layers, you have a problem. So my system of clothing, when there's some pictures here that you can see how it works, it's 1 layer thick, mono-layered, homogeneous, open cell polyurethane foam will let you do all the things we're talking about. I'm not going to say a whole lot more about it right here. We'll touch on it a little bit more so that you understand some of the technology. Just be watching for it, or learn how to make your own. If you don't want to buy it, then build it and get the performance you want. The bottom line is this: if you're not getting the comfort that you want with the clothing that you're wearing, don't blame it on the weather. It's not bad weather. It's just simply clothing that's inadequate for it. If you find yourself getting wet and cold, it's not because the weather is bad, it's because the clothing is wrong. You look at some of the pictures of the things that I've done, places I've gone to, and some of the extremes of wind. On Mount Washington, leaning into the wind, it's 13 below zero. There's a 110-mile-an-hour wind. I don't have on a balaclava. I have on my hood. And my hood in this case is going over the outside of what's called a face tunnel. You see that snorkel hood that sticks out there. And my face is bare. Looking into just this last year, this is my oldest son when we're up in this extreme blizzard where it's 80-plus mile-an-hour winds, 10 degrees, white out up there. And he's wearing this face tunnel, and you see his face is bare. There's nothing right on his face, but it's back inside of this face tunnel where the wind can't get at it. And yes, there's ice and things all build up around the outside, but it's not on your face. It's not uncomfortable. You don't feel wet. And in this particular case, because the fabrics are really slick, you just lean over and just whack it, and the ice just falls out. That's right around the opening. No threat to the face, no possibility of frostbite or anything like that. And some people say, well, yeah, you tunnel vision, you don't have any peripheral vision. Let me tell you what, in the white out there ain't nothing to see anyway. You can barely see your feet out there. And so there's not much to see. You just point your head in the direction that you want to look, and you take a look. So you have complete protection from head to foot for face and everything. We've got an inch of insulation on us, and of course we do the footwear the same. So that's all I want to say about it right now. But be sure, if you're not getting the performance you want, then start tuning things up. And then if you're going into extremes, or you might be caught in extremes like I'm showing you, then you've got to have clothing that will let you do that safely, because we're doing it without fire and without the need for shelter. Let's talk about footwear right now and foot performance. I've given you a little bit of that in the hang tag, but let's look at a few things. I'll give you some descriptions here, and then you can go look at the video. Well, in the area of footwear, let's talk the philosophy a little bit about manufacturers and those kinds of things, because you look at the hang tags on there, and I covered that in depth in here, and I think you understand that the hang tags are baloney. Hang tag 100 below zero, baloney. Hang tag 40 below zero, baloney, unless they told you for how long. So we've covered that. But what's the problem with footwear? Why is it that we can't find anything that really works? First off, understand you've got to take care of the core. We've taken care of that. So now then it comes down to the footwear. That's why in the cold box testing that I did, we're sitting in a warm room. We have one boot on one foot, one on another one. We're just testing what the boot does. We're not testing what the whole body is doing in this case. It's just the boot. I'm inactive, and the boot is exposed to these cold temperatures. How well is it doing? That's where we came up with those temperature curves. If you're listening to this for the first time, go back to the previous programs, come to our website, because we'll have them there, and you can listen to this whole program called Winter Safety Made Real. Well, what's the problem with footwear? We have some of them that are really, really expensive, and they really don't keep your feet all that warm. Now, some of them work better than others, but here's one of the problems, particularly for people that are mountain climbing or doing some mountaineering or things like that. It's like, we don't want big, fat feet. In some cases, it's because there's skis and there's crampons and things like that. If you don't want big, fat feet, big, fat boots, then you've got a problem because you can't keep warm. There's no magic. You can't do it with very thin insulation. Now, when I take a few of these things apart, we'll look at them for just a moment, and you can see the problem. You're just looking at the thickness of insulation. If they have liners that pull out, take them out and see what you have for thickness. I take apart this 100 below zero boot that has this liner that goes inside of it, and you take a look at that, and it's like, well, that's about a ½ inch thick, maybe slightly over top of that. And then if you look at it, and they make the point in here, I can see just a little bit of glistening in here, so there's a little bit of reflectiveness to one of these layers, and I have these multiple kinds of materials. But how dense is this material? It's fairly dense. This happens to be a synthetic wool, so that works better than the natural wool. But still, it's not thick enough, and I don't have an inch of air. That's the bottom line. I've got to have an inch or more than an inch of air if I'm going to have any hope of taking care of my feet. So, it has a hang tag, 100 below zero. How long? Well, not real long if you're inactive. You're in the store, you're trying to make a decision, pull out the guts and see how thick it is. The other thing we're looking at, of course, on this white boot is it's got a rubber bottom on it. It's waterproof. Now, if you're slogging through slush, waterproof's okay. If I'm supposed to be using this thing well below zero, there is no water to be slogging through. So what's the problem with this boot? This liner that's down inside of this waterproof bottom in here, it's collecting moisture because it can't get out. There's ice that's collecting all over the inside of the rubber because the rubber's quite cold. You take these things apart and they're full of ice down in there. I'd rather have the moisture get out. But you know what? People don't build boots that are non-waterproof out there. They're very difficult to find. I'll show you in just a moment what my boots look like that I make. So let's pull apart this one that is, rated for 40 below zero. It says that, and you see that, well, its insulation is thinner if you look at them right here, but it's obviously not thick enough to take care of you at 40 below zero, and the 100 below zero boot is only a little bit thicker. So once again, it's just getting in your mind that it's not the hang tag, it's the ability to take these things apart and look at them and see what they'll do. One of the things to be careful of is the hype in the advertising. And I laugh at it a little bit, but I know that some people are sucked into it. Here I have this boot. This is maybe 10 years ago now. It was on one of the shopping channels at night, and I just flipped across it. I don't watch the shopping channels at all, but I came across this one, and they're talking about this super warm winter footwear that you've just got to have, and they have these two pretty girls, ladies standing in these things, and they talk about the fleece upper. By the way, a fleece upper is nice. It's an eighth of an inch thick that's on top of this thing. But they made the point that these ladies, they were standing on blocks of dry ice, and there they were. They took the picture down there. There was these blocks of dry ice, and you can see the cold air coming off of it, the fog that it makes off that, and that's 90 below zero, whatever it is. And they're standing on top of this thing, and they're going like that you can even be standing on top of way below zero dry ice, and your feet aren't going to get cold, so these things are super warm. You got to get them and those kinds of things. Okay, what are they doing? Well, this actually has a halfway decent insole in it, and it's thick. It's really, really thick of this molded foam that's in there. And so, yes, you could stand on dry ice for, 15 minutes or so, and you wouldn't feel the cold. It'll work its way through those. But what's the point? Well, you can walk outside on a 40 below zero day on your 40 below zero sidewalk and go out and get the mail and come back in, and the bottoms of your feet won't get cold. Now the upper, which is very open to movable air, if you stepped outside and it was 40 below zero and the wind is blowing, it's going to blast right through there and freeze everything above the bottoms of your feet. So here again, it's just what are they really saying and why, and who's trying to get you to buy something, and they're not telling you the whole story, and you're just kind of filling in the blanks. And that's a lot of times what advertisers do. They give you some information, and then you fill in the blanks the way you want it to be, and you go buy their stuff. Remember my definition of a lie early on when we were talking thin insulation? Any communication, written or unwritten, stated or unstated, holding back information, not telling you everything completely. That's the intent to get you to buy something, to deceive you so that you won't. Anyway, you get my point. Just be careful. Watch, think, ask questions, look at it carefully. I bought these just because I knew what was going on, and I wanted to show them in teaching my classes about, okay, I can stand on blocks of dry ice, but I'm going to freeze everything above the soles of my feet. Now, this is a special purpose boot. It's a mountaineering boot. It's designed for people to use with crampons or with telemark skis, but primarily for people that are doing mountaineering work and climbing, because it'll hold the crampons. It's a very, very rigid boot, very much like a ski boot, so that you can hook your crampons on it and then you can point climb up an ice fall. But you look at these things, you say, and they're rated. I don't remember what the tag on it says right now, but they're rated for 40, 50 below zero, something like that. Let's take a look at what's inside of these boots. The outside is a rigid plastic shell, and plastic like this doesn't have a lot of insulation to it. It has a Vibram molded sole, very dense rubber. There's no insulation there, and it has a 1/16 of an inch of cork stapled inside of it, so there's not much there. Then you take a look at the liner. Of course, you're going to wear a pair of socks or something like that. And when I come down here and I feel on the sides of this thing, the insulation, outside's waterproof, so it's going to be collecting moisture inside. I feel around here, and I've got, that might be a 1/16 of an inch, well, maybe even an 1/8 of an inch thick between the waterproof and then the liner that's on the inside. I come up around the ankles, and it's kind of like, wow, around the ankles, and here, heck, I've got 1/2 inch of insulation. So we insulate your ankles, but your toes, they got nothing around them. But you don't want to have fat feet, so you have these nice slim feet, but they're also cold, and it's a problem. Now, my all-time favorite in the footwear is one that's quite amazing, and it's interesting. It's the lengths that people will go to try and keep their feet warm. Well, what this is a liner that's designed to go inside of one of these snowpack things like a Sorel. And you look at it, it's got these tubes that come up out of the bottom, and it has this thing right here. Well, this thing is considered a boiler. And then what you have that goes along with it are these little fuel sticks. They're charcoal. They're just a molded charcoal in there, that you light the charcoal and you drop it down inside of this boiler, and what it has is, it's a little heat exchanger. You have a fluid that's water and antifreeze in it, that smoldering little charcoal burning down there heats the water, and then it transfers that heat into the water, and you pump it around the bottom, and you see these tubes with the hot water. They circulate around the bottoms of your feet to give you some warmth to the bottom of your feet, because you're always getting cold on the bottoms, and then if you can keep the bottoms warm, maybe you can keep the rest of your feet warm. And it's a clever device. And I will tell you, it's a very clever device, how it fits on your boots and everything in there. I mean, all the complexity of building this thing and making a little heat exchanger and a place to put fire, that you have this smoldering charcoal around your ankles down there for your ski boots, and it has this nice picture of a guy ice fishing or skiing with warm feet because he has a fire around his feet. Now, what is this? This is an admission that you have inadequate insulation, so we're trying to artificially, engineers do a lot of things artificially, we're trying to artificially heat our feet to keep them warm so they don't get cold. It works, sort of, but what's the problem? Well, if I run out of fuel and I don't have a way to heat the water, then my feet are going to get cold. And if I step in a puddle of water and I drown the fire, I'll never get it going again in there, and so I put out the fire. When the fire goes out, and you see, what did I say in the beginning? One of the taboos of winter is a dependence on fire. This is fire. Remember the hand warmers, those are fire. All these things are fire. If you're dependent on fire, you're at risk, because fire is not dependable. You need something that's dependable. The things that's dependable is your body, when you take care of it, and having the right kind of clothing that insulates you properly, so that you're going to trap the heat, and that's the right kind of insulation that allows the moisture to get through. That's why we're talking about all of these things. So what does it take for you to really have warm feet? Warm core, adequate insulation around your feet, and so you're going to end up with a boot that'll look kind of like this. It's going to be big. It's going to be fat. And as a matter of fact, this has a liner that goes inside of it, totally breathable, non-waterproof that's inside. The outer shell is completely non-waterproof. It's just a heavy-duty Cordura that's uncoated, so that it's very abrasion, puncture resistance. And then that liner that's inside, made with this open-cell polyurethane foam, is 1.5 inches thick. The straps allow me to squeeze it down tighter if I need to, or I can relax it and have it big and puffy. There's a lot of things about it. Not here to teach you about that boot, but I make them homemade that look like this. This is my design, and then this is what I teach people to make. If you want to produce your own, it looks a little different, but the performance is the same. That's what we were using on the mountain a year ago in those extremes out there, and everybody had homemade clothing out there from head to foot. You can learn to do those things, but that's another class for another time and some other information that I really have to show you. Well, as we come to the end of this, I hope you're starting to understand why I do what I do. It's to give the performance that I want and I need so that I'm okay. And I simply want to share these things with you so that you can be asking a lot of questions of yourself, of people that are making things. You can be selecting, deciding what you want to use, and if need be, you may in fact want to change to something completely different, because if you're not getting the results you need to be comfortable and safe, then, well, maybe you need to make some significant changes. We'll help you do that.